Hello, my name is Alex Goblet. I'm project manager, part of the backup and recovery services team. Been with the Oracle company for 4 years now. Have over 30 years of experience in the storage and data protection industry. I used to work for companies like EMC Legacy and Dell EMC, Veritas, Symantec, NetApp. So have plenty of experience to share with you guys. But today, we will not actually going to be focusing on just the matter of the backup and recovery. It's going to be a little bit unusual session, if I may. What we're going to do, we will talk about the basically setting up the level of the understanding and knowledge and ramifications of what is happening in the cybersecurity universe and what kind of implication does it have on just the entire IT industry, not just on the backup and recovery. So I'm going to stop my video and I'm going to start switching to the actual content. So let's start with this slide. Probably everybody's seen this slide by now. Okay, so there are some critical factors, and we typically kind of, not just us, like everybody's saying the same old, so that the ransomware is threats. It has huge implications on the businesses and everyday lives. And so there was a huge damage, financial, the reputational, whatever you name it, is going to be correct assumption. And a lot of that hinging on the damage that actually is being done for the transactional environment, meaning your precious database and applications, right? One of the things that I found kind of fascinating is that in 2024, actually, the impact had dropped by 35%. And there was a good reason for that. Industry is much more aware of the damage that it's doing, and it's actually much better prepared. And part of it, actually, the help that comes by the way of migrating from the on-premises or isolated third-party frameworks to the public clouds, whether it's going to be Oracle Cloud or it's going to be Google, or it's going to be Amazon. And we will go just why actually this takes such a significant effect on the sustainability of the overall cyber resiliency. So what are we going to do? We will not spend time on this slide. We will pop up the hood and we will go into the actual guts of what is happening in our world. And we're going to start by kind of diving into what does it mean, cyber resiliency. So cyber resilience actually is referring to the organizational ability to withstand, adapt, and to recover from the cyber threats and incidents. And it goes actually much deeper than that. Okay, so the cyber resiliency notion of the cyber resiliency is not just about prevention. The next step is how fast you can recover. And the last but not least pillar of the cyber resiliency is what is happening if your environment is compromised. How sustainable your operation environment is. So how much of the resilience for the cyber attack and survivability of the events you actually have within your enterprise. So there are a few cyber resilience pillars that I would like to outline. One is risk assessment and management. And again, as you can see, it's quite a deviation from the typical kind of backup and recovery pitch, right? And so this is just the overall impact on the organization. How do we operate? How do we today trying to go and kind of along with our own business requirements and survive critical events? So the risk assessment goes into the mitigation strategies, and it is not just the simple kind of buying a new tool or the better protection from the phishing scam in the email. Is just the overall scope of the mitigation strategies within the enterprise that touches pretty much everything that you have under the sun. Incident response and planning, and we'll talk about this because this one actually has significant improvements compared to where we were just a couple of years ago. And so there is a good reason just because of the recognition of the critical events and the necessity of sharing the information across the enterprise just to prevent, not just mitigate the risk. Security awareness and training. So we go through this training literally every day. For example, even within Oracle, we routinely get the phishing scam kind of mimicking a set of emails. And so the security guys basically just do assessment if we are aware to click these links or attachments or not. And actually, within my own team, we've done a lot of mistakes just clicking the default links and just getting to the sites saying, you misbehaved. That was a training. And what is relevant to us today is backup and recovery. And it is just pretty straightforward. Please back up your data, right? So if you cannot back up your data, make sure that you're going to have some level of protection for your critical data. And we have a lot of technologies now in place, and especially with the advancement of the public clouds, this notion of the overall data protection gets to the absolute next level. So I found this excellent study by PricewaterhouseCoopers. As you know, this is top 3 consulting firms in the world. And they just recently run a few interesting studies. One is about the overall cost of the breaches of the cyber resilience, cyber security within the enterprises. Another one was the assessment and conversation of CISO audience within a variety of the industry verticals. So a couple of kind of interesting findings that they published. So number one, as you can see, the percentage of the million-plus breach in 2024 increased by almost 10% compared to 2023. And the list of the verticals that have been compromised and actually paid the most are really fascinating. If you're going to pay attention to this right side of the slide, the number one hit is healthcare, then it goes telco, then it goes finance. And the reason, if you kind of start thinking about it, like why is it happening, why retail and consumer are the least compromised, because they're not business critical, they're not life critical. So the number one criticality is definitely healthcare. Number two is, of course, communication. Number three is, of course, financial. So this slide just makes absolutely perfect sense. So they just took it one step further, okay? And they scouted what might be concerning in a sense of the cyber attacks, right? And to my surprise, ransomware actually is not even close to the first one. The first one is cloud-related threats. Why is it happening? Because cloud is much higher adopted today than it was yesterday and the day before. So when people migrate their business critical application and workloads to the public cloud, obviously they are concerned with the overall cloud related threats. Unlike on premises, when you might isolate specific ransomware or some other specific threats that you might be facing. In cloud, you just want to have everything being secure. So what is important to see in 24? And I put this asterisk just so that's the slides and facts so that actually have links to the study in the comment part of the slides. So you will have access to it if you will be wondering, just to get a little bit more detailed outlook of the research work that was done by PwC. So number one is 35% of the executives, they think that mandatory reporting of cyber risk management is good. And it is really, really difficult to disagree with this assessment. Unfortunately, it's not 100%, so it should have been absolutely 100%, if not 150%. So it's just 35%. 25%, they actually do something about security and privacy features into the product and enterprise. Just 25%. Only 3% of the companies, they basically continually updating and improving the situation of the risk management and cybersecurity assessment. And only 2% of the companies are actually doing the actual legwork. So that means that basically the most of our critical businesses are extremely vulnerable even today with all the experience, bad experience and knowledge that we developed over the past 10 years. So what are the cyber resilience best practices? I'm not going to go on over this list. This is more about some like kind of reference point for you guys. But what is absolutely not surprising that number two is the implementation of the cyber recovery technology solutions, including immutable backups. And we will talk about immutability a little bit later. I got an excellent question about immutability, so we're going to dive into some details in just a few minutes. And number 3 on the list is the cyber recovery playbook for IT loss scenarios. If you guys been around long enough, you probably remember from the 80s and 90s disaster recovery playbooks, like humongous folios with all the instructions, how it should be done, failover, fallback, what you're going to do with EMC SRDF for the primary capacity and data domain replication across the sites on the secondary, and then what you're going to do with the tape drives, blah, blah, blah. It's kind of felt that it's long gone because we're already kind of shifting towards much better technologies overall. But apparently, as you can see, it is back. And it is back with a vengeance. It is way more complicated. And the cyber recovery playbook is not exactly isolated. This is just the set of the overall behavior of stuff, the practices for everybody. How do you deal to ensure that you're going to be able to recover as fast as possible because your company is losing money? So what are the implications of all this? Number 1 is the adoption of the security rules by governments and new regulations. And I'm going to dive into just 2 of those because there are major drivers. The front runners are North America and Europe, which is not surprising. But we see the same practices being adopted in New Zealand, Australia, all over the world. And again, unfortunately, for the pretty good reason. Again, so let's start with the Americas. The SEC new guidelines on cybersecurity was released in 2023, and it has 2 major things that actually mandated now for all enterprises. Number 1 is 10K filings annually. What does it include? What does it mean 10K filings? You actually, as the C-level executive, you are on the hook to deliver complete guidelines and what is done within the enterprise to ensure that cyber resiliency is in place. Number 2 is what I already mentioned, the rapid reporting about the cyber breach. And the same SEC regulation now mandates, so that's a new form 8K that should be posted to SEC for any cyber breach within 4 days. And so here's the real life example. During the holiday season, Krispy Kreme was compromised and most of the Krispy Kremes went down in flames. It was a massive breach. It had big implications on the Krispy Kreme business. As you can imagine, it took actually a while to restore. And that was actually probably the first time that I saw like the real SEC 8K filing outside of the financial industry, because originally it was developed for the finance. But as you can see, Krispy Kreme is not exactly a financial entity. It doesn't belong to SEC to start with. But this regulation actually now affects pretty much every enterprise and every business in the United States. The same is happening in Europe. Okay, so in Europe, it's called the DORA, Digital Operational Resilience Act. It is much more strict. It was, again, developed primarily for the financial industry. It was published in 23, and it provided grace period until January 17, 2025, so it is already enacted, to let enterprises to comply with this regulation. So they graciously gave everybody 2 years. Again, I started with EU financials, but now it is absolutely mandatory regulation, not just for the financial industry, but for everything that the government, EU government, deems to be critical. So another wrinkle that it includes critical service providers. Who are the critical service providers? It's Oracle, it's Google, it's Amazon. So the regulation actually imposes a lot of tricky guidelines that basically say that, yes, you as the business owner, you are on the hook and you're responsible for this. But mind you, like anything that you deem critical in a sense of the services being provided to enterprise belong to the same boat. And to make it even worse, unlike SEC, Europeans imposed extremely strict penalties. So they outlined pretty much everything, the monetary penalty, and actually there are going to be more to that coming a little bit later, meaning that people can go to jail if they will not provide sufficient response to the mandatory requirements. And it includes business continuity and policies and disaster recovery plans. Here are the list of the affected institutes in European Union, right? And as you can see, there are third-party service providers, and then there is a special regulation that belongs to the critical third-party service providers. That includes Oracle and Oracle Cloud. So let's talk about Lingo. And so the reason why I'm going to spend just a little bit of time just to making sure that the terminology is common. And unfortunately, that's not the case. Let's talk about kind of security maturity model. Then we're going to dive into the specifics of the kind of Lingo. Okay, so as you can see, there are mostly recognized 3 levels of the maturity model. It all starts right here. So level 1 is resilience, meaning that's how fast you can respond to how fast you can recover. Okay, and that's where we live with the recovery service and so with the zero dead loss recovery appliances for the on-premises. And then it goes into the level 2 as the business with authentication, with the sensitive data, and then it goes to the actual high availability and a little bit more flexible and more responsive kind of security posture that allows you to have much better survivability and much better time to recover. So why database? Again, in every transactional environment. So let's go back to the same slide for the vertical. So number 1 compromised vertical is healthcare. Extremely transactional. Patients data, extremely vulnerable environment, right? So database become the number 1 target overall. So we acknowledge a few kind of major threats on the database level. And you're probably well aware of all of them, but I will just list them just really quickly. And so credential theft misuse. That leads to the unauthorized acquisition of the business critical data. Data exfiltration. So it used to be scrape, now it's called exfiltration. That means that's people that actually are able to extract data from your databases. You have backup compromise, because obviously backup should be compromised. If backup is not compromised, you can recover. So when sophisticated people trying to penetrate your enterprise, they will go all the way down to the resiliency level. And of course, they're going to try to affect your backups. SQL ingestion, typical question, can we identify SQL ingestion from your backups? The answer is absolutely not. It's going to be too late, and if you want to deal with a SQL ingestion vulnerability, there are special tools in our toolbox, especially in the cloud. We have dedicated products like DataSafe that actually can help you identify an effect of the SQL ingestion. Privilege escalation, so this one is tricky, and that means that, for example, me as the mid-level manager, somebody got to me, and I have credentials that my executive shared with me just to get access to a couple of critical sites, and then this vulnerability can be escalated because the executive credentials are going to be compromised as well. Network sniffing, extremely difficult. Typically, it's kind of first wave of the attack when they plan sniffers and network adjusted to check what is cooking within the enterprise and just maybe to get to the business critical communication and credentials. Production system outage, that's pretty obvious. So this is typically the outcome of already compromised environment. Again, so most likely all these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 items before the production system outage should occur before they're gonna pull the plug and actually create the system outage. So security posture. This is what belongs to the CISA office, and it is the overall definition of the cybersecurity strengths in the organization. It's not just DBAs, it's not just the storage admins, it is the overall scope of the behavior and scope of the human beings within the same enterprise. And as you can see, it does include the IT network estate system, like everything that might be even relevant to the accessibility of the public interface, internet. So the definition, the official definition is it is a collective and holistic approach to managing organization software and hardware through controls, policies, procedures. So as you can see, it's extremely loaded. And so if you will refer to my previous part talking about what used to be disaster recovery planning, you can see how massive the changes and how much is evolved now when we define the vulnerabilities and security posture. And one of the kind of interesting wrinkles now, the new industry that basically took IT by storm is the cybersecurity posture assessment. Oracle has our own assessment force. We do cybersecurity posture assessment for both on-premises and cloud business and hybrid businesses. And we work extensively with the cybersecurity assessment guys, even though that we kind of not really associated with you with backup and recovery. But now, because it's all tied all together, it is relevant to the conversation. Just a couple of kind of terms for the cyber lingo. So, and you probably know that, so I'm just kind of putting it out so you can refer if asked about what does it mean attack surface or attack vector. So attack surface is the sum of the attack vectors. That means that the overall scope of the potential vulnerability in the enterprise. And attack vector is just a singular, for example, email phishing or network sniffing. Blast radius is the overall scope of the damage. It is really interesting. So it's a part of the kind of cybersecurity assessment, because if, for example, cybersecurity assessment found a glaring hole in the overall posture, they can actually identify what might be the maximum damage that might be inflicted. And zero trust. And so this one is extremely critical to pretty much everything that we do today. And I will get to it in just a second. One of the things that it is pretty evident if you're going to go to a variety of vendors, okay, each definition of the zero trust varies. Implementation definitely varies. And it is really critical to understand where it's coming from, why people start talking about zero trust, and what does it mean, zero trust. And kind of on the surface, it's pretty straightforward. It means that you cannot trust anything or anyone within enterprise, meaning that you have to continually verify and validate everything that is happening within the enterprise. So where it came from? Zero trust actually is not a new thing. It was introduced back in 2010. And it was done by a brilliant person. And the initial was that what is happening within the network-based cybersecurity universe, how you can improve. Because typically we tend to say, like, okay, I run my RMA and restore validation, so I am safe. Absolutely not, because you did it a month ago, and it was a month ago, and you don't know if you actually have compromised data or not. So it led to the adoption of the zero trust principles, and it started penetrating a lot of enterprise that started with actually industrial. And then it went even further, and the National Institute of Standard Technology adopted the zero trust model. And basically, again, the definitions, it is designed to eliminate implicit trust in any element, component, nodes, or service, meaning the system as a whole should be continually validated and verified. And then government took it even further, and so they issued memorandum in 22 for the federal zero trust architecture. And as you can see, it was based on the NIST standard that we just discussed. And it covered identity, device, network, application, workload, and data, meaning everything. So that has actually direct implications on what you can see, especially in Oracle Cloud. So you can look it up, and there is quite a bit of documentation for the variety of parts of the cloud services that we provide. So meaning that the overall framework that we built on the cloud is fundamentally based on this NIST standard. We have documentation of the zero trust. We have documentation on the zero trust mitigation. We have documentation for the zero trust security constructs within Oracle Cloud. And of course, it goes even further and it touches on the zero trust data protection, meaning that you have to have a continuous risk assessment for your backups. You have to have the constant validation of the disaster recovery practices. And it basically demands that all data should be protected everywhere. So here comes the actual Oracle technology, and so what is the relevancy of the cyber resilience to the recovery service and recovery appliances for the on-premises. Let's talk about the cloud first, okay? And what we have done, we introduced zero data loss recovery service as the immutable service. So let me just address this question about what does it mean immutability. There are too many ways to define what does it mean immutable. And we have actually a definition of the immutability of our own. And the reason why we decided to develop a definition of the immutability as a service because we do not believe that the storage level immutability, meaning that when you write data and it can be deleted or altered, is good enough. It is absolutely not good enough. Because if you're going to be deleting or re-encrypting data, it's not going to be a good outcome for anybody. So in the public cloud, so the Oracle Cloud, we have a layered defense and schema that goes from the identity management and goes all the way down to the storage level. So what does it mean immutable service? Okay, so first and foremost, on-premises and the cloud service, they have the same immutability requirements, but they have absolutely different challenges. And the reason for that, on-premises, you have a lot of people that have a specific task and they have specific role. In the cloud, you consume it all. You come to us and you say, I just need a service. And this service should be immutable. And my data should be protected and secure. And this is why the challenges are not the same, not identical. What is the good part is that we actually built from the ground up all the services have to comply with the security and maximum availability architecture practices. These practices not always being enforced for the on-prem, and for a variety of reasons. It might be a lack of expertise, it might be a lack of funding, it might be whatever. But again, when you buy the service, you automatically presume that everything comes as a package, and it is absolutely true. Let's start with the encryption. On-premises, not a lot of data being encrypted. In the cloud, we mandate that all the data are going to be encrypted. And it goes even further to the backup and recovery. If you will send or try to send to the recovery service unencrypted data, it will be rejected. We do not touch on the management of the TDE keys. It is absolutely different universe. It doesn't belong to the backup and recovery. You guys deal with it. You deal with the key rotation, whatever it might be, that is required by the CX level. But the outcome that we know how to recognize and how to deal with changes even on the key encryption side. The recovery service itself is a completely Oracle managed tenancy. You don't see it, you don't even know about it. It doesn't belong to the production tests or any tenancy that's any aspect of the tenancy that you might have running in OCI. You cannot get access to the backup data. You do not even have a possibility of doing like much of the damage in a sense of the compromising backup data because it is segregated in a sense of the accessibility. So even the admin privileges do not allow you to access the actual backup data outside of the backup and typical restore operations. And that actually defines the immutability in our eyes much better than anything else. So what we're saying, we are immutable because you cannot do anything to it. We also deploy physical highly available pairs. It's not a singular appliance in the backend, and it is done for the same security reasoning. We provide a logical air gap with the paired appliances. So we even segregate on the physical level to make sure that the environment is going to be completely sustainable. And it also gives you the possibility of not feeling any impact of the production outages, the rolling updates, the things related to the patching or whatever it might be in the backends. We making sure that because we're deployed in the HA parent infrastructure, you will not see any effect and your backups are going to be always available. Next one is actually belongs to the overall cloud construct. It is a role-based access controls. And we basically comply with the same RBAC definition, taking care of the accessibility to the backup data. So you can segregate and you can actually design the specific personas that, for example, will not even have access to the definition of the backup policies and retention management. Next one is government regulations and compliance. This is the big one. So in OCI clouds and Oracle clouds, you cannot deploy any service which is not compliant with the government regulations and requirements. So we by default designed as the completely compliant framework. So whether it's going to be HIPAA regulations for the healthcare, or it might be DoD regulations for the military institutions, military zones, we have to be compliant with all of the above. Otherwise, we cannot provide services for you. And another one is I already kind of mentioned the definition of the immutability. As you can see, we even shut down any possibility to run arm and delete workflows. They will just error out. And everything is managed by the policy. And it is done by intent, and this is yet another excellent addition for the immutability. Okay, so what we designed, we took the protection policy, and so we decided to enable retention lock. So even on the logical standpoint, if you have access to policies and you are a bad actor, hypothetically, you can decrease retention, let's say from 26 days to 14 days, and therefore compromising the overall scope of the recoverability. So what we've done, we enabled a retention lock on the policy level. If it is enabled, you cannot do anything with retention management. You can only increase retention. You cannot take database associated with the locked policy outside of the policy. So what it does, it prevents a database to move to the unprotected policy. It is done by the high demand from the financial industry originally, but it is an excellent tool for pretty much everybody. If you have business critical applications and you are supposed to be compliant with the government regulations, this is just something that you should be considering. And again, that goes back to the definition of the immutable environment overall. So as you can see, we started from the top, from the management, from the access, from the impossibility to delete data, impossible to access backup data itself, sustainable, highly available backends, and completely isolated, locked environment. So back to this policy. So I mentioned that you can only increase retention. We do provide 14 days grace period. So it's done intentionally because we recognize that it might be, for example, enabled by mistake. So we make sure that because it's so strict and you cannot change once it is enabled, we give you 14 days grace period just to make sure that it was not a mistake. And again, restriction apply to all users. Tenancy admins, any admins, so they cannot change. Once the retention lock is enabled, it is immutable as the service. Next one is really cool. It is actually inherited quality from the our infrastructure, which is running on the zero data loss recovery appliances. Oftentimes, people ask question, okay, so we have our immutable environment, but can you validate that actually data are fully preserved and actually not compromised? So the backend technology allows us to do a lot of fancy things. Number one is we live inside the private database. We have knowledge of the database structure. We know the data formats. We know how to deal with it on the block level. So the first one is we run RMAN backup validate. So we check the data blocks and checksums are correct before sending any backup data to the backend. So that means that we validate before we actually start backing up. And if we sense that blocks are compromised, we will flag and we will reject backup data to start with. Otherwise, it's going to the primary appliance on the backend. It's getting validated on the receive, making sure that all the blocks are correct. And because we have HA pairs, we do exactly the same. We revalidating on the disk, and then we do this in the transit, and then we run validation on the secondary appliance as well, whether it's going to be on premises or it's in the cloud. So in the cloud, again, you just get it for free because we're running in the HA pairs and it makes a lot of sense. And then we basically take it even further and we actually running validation before sending to the long-term retention if necessary. If, for example, you keep your data for 10 years, so we're going to make sure that you're going to have recoverable entity even for the long-term retention. So just to summarize, okay, the cyber resiliency challenges. Just trying to be absolutely brutally honest here, okay, so as we already stated, only 2% of the businesses are really compliant with the new regulations and new requirements. And a lot of reasons, okay? And so it might be insufficient in-house expertise. It might be not enough money. It might be infrastructure that so you didn't do like a good job refreshing or patching and you know, still running on the Oracle 12 instead of 19C or 23 by AI. So there are a lot of issues that might be basically lingering and actually not allowing you to really be ready for the potential compromise. And your focus has changed, again, because of all these new regulations, because of this new knowledge, and because of the new things imposed on the enterprises by the assessment, by the risk assessment and CISO offices. You start thinking about the database integrated solutions and not just a point solutions, right? So it's not good enough now to say, oh, I gotta enable data domain immutability on the storage level. Like I said, it's not a good practice because you basically potentially compromising encryption key along with your data, or the data can be completely re-encrypted. New threats and threat protection, new language, and actually when you go now into the meeting, you oftentimes just dive into the security vulnerability discussions with the CISO folks. And the outcome of all this. So we definitely do promote the world best protection for Oracle database cloud services and on-premises with the recovery service and with the recovery appliances. As you can see, they are absolutely cross-linked. We do a lot of inherited qualities. We have a lot of enhancements that we specifically designed for the cloud, again, because you come to us and you demand to provide the complete package, including not vulnerable environments, including the making sure that access management and identity management is taking place and actually following all the way through to the backup practice and restore. And of course, you demand that your data got to be secure and you got to have complete recoverability. Just a couple of resources. The first link I would strongly encourage to take a look. It is an excellent documentation for the cyber resilience and capabilities in OCI. Again, that's going to give you a much better comprehension on what we can do as the cloud business and what is the level of the readiness that we can offer to you guys as our precious customers. And a lot of links on the blogs and additional kind of data sources, including the product pages and some other additional links. And as you can see, we outlined both on-premises and the cloud services overall. And with that, that's a wrap. We have another question that was posted before this presentation. Tim, would you like to address this question about the data protection for the 50 terabyte database?
Yeah, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. There was it was submitted to this session. I do see this individual also on this call, and we can follow up separately as well. But the question was about a 50 terabyte read-only table space with date range partitions of tables. Tables are not self-contained, and there are newer partitions which are read-write. They back up the read-write portion of the database, which is just using the standard RMAN skip read-only. And when RMAN restores the database, then all the read-only data files have to be present before opening the database. They have to copy those. I mean, during the restore, those read-only files are restored as normal, and it can take a while. Typically, they're larger as you make table spaces only. They just kind of become archived kind of data, so they can grow over time. The question is about any practices for opening the database read-write without the read-only table spaces and rolling them in at a later date. This is actually a really interesting question. We've heard about this from other customers. The RMAN documentation doesn't really go into details of this, but we actually have a procedure. It is not published, but it is something that we can definitely share with you one-on-one. And so it's basically using RMAN commands and your alter table space online and offline commands to at a high level you simply offline all the read-only table spaces. Okay, when you offline the tables, so when you restore the control file and you mount it, then you offline the read-only table spaces. That will tell RMAN not to go after restoring those table spaces. Okay, but you do need to restore the read-write table spaces obviously at the very minimum. The system and sysocs undo those kind of related table spaces. And then once you have the read-write portion restored, then you can actually bring the database up with those read-only table spaces offline. And then over time, you can then bring in the read-only table spaces as needed. So it isn't just a few set of commands like I can just tell you now. It's actually a procedure that we've documented, but it's something that we can share with you on an as-needed basis. So if anyone else is interested in that, you can contact us. We have our emails that we can provide. Actually, maybe I can just put that here so that everyone can see that. Because I don't think there's an email feature on the. Okay, so that's my email, and if you are interested in this procedure, let me know, and we can also provide it for you. So it isn't in the doc, but we're considering doing that in the future. But yeah, that should work for you. And again, we can talk later about that on email. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Tim. I don't see any open questions or anything else. So if you guys have any questions or even outside of the session, please post it. I'm gonna give you a couple of minutes. Otherwise, we just gonna call it a wrap. Alrighty. Thank you again for your attention. Really appreciate your presence. I hope that you found this session meaningful and helpful for your businesses. And I look forward to seeing you next month. Thank you again.